Howdy, welcome to the first video in the Intermediate Excel module. Throughout this module, we are going to cover two useful functions or tools in Excel. The first is a pivot table, and the second is VLOOKUPs. In this video, we will just cover the basics of pivot tables. Let's open up the Excel workbook provided with this module. Here we have a data set I downloaded from Yahoo Financials. It's stock data for a variety of different companies. When I first look at this data, I want to do a little bit of quick formatting. I'm actually going to leave the table fairly unformatted because we're not really going to use this source data. In a minute, we're going to create a pivot table, which will look a little more visually appealing anyway, so I don't need to make this tab too pretty. However, you could use format as table if you really wanted to. You could do some minimal formatting. For now, I'm just going to auto fit this column here because I had those dollar signs right here. So I'm going to auto fit the column. Remember, I do that by just double clicking in between the two columns. Then I'm going to create a pivot table with this data. To create a pivot table, you want to select the Insert tab here in your menu. So again, just this Insert tab up at the top of your menu. Then select Pivot Table on the far left side. A pop-up screen will come up. Most often, the default Excel recommends on this pop-up screen will be what you want to use. It is basically just showing you what data will be included in the pivot table. Right now, it's selecting the whole table. If you have a weird table or spaces in your table, you might need to actually select the range for Excel just by clicking over here and highlighting the range. Since ours is right, we don't need to do anything there. The other default setting here is to put the pivot table on a new worksheet. I always use this default of putting it on the new worksheet rather than putting it on this existing worksheet. Just makes things a little bit easier. That's going to create a new tab that will have the pivot table on it. Since these settings are good for us, we're just going to click OK. And now a pivot table has been created on this tab for us. It's labeled Sheet 1, so I'm just going to quickly rename it Pivot Table. Not a big change. And now we have the bones of the pivot table ready for us to play a little bit. On the right side of the screen, we have a menu titled Pivot Table Fields over here. This screen will disappear if you click outside of the pivot table, so don't panic, just click right back in and it'll come up. This menu includes a list of fields that are available for us to add to the report. These are actually the column headers in our original data. So these column headings here became fields in this pivot table field list. We can drag these fields into these area boxes down here. There's a box for filters, columns, rows, and values. How we drag these fields down is going to dictate what our pivot table actually looks like. Let's go ahead and create a table together. I want to create a table where we are calculating the average adjusted close price for each stock included in our data. To do that, I need to think about whether or not I want my data to show up in rows, so down like a list here, or in columns, meaning across this way. Most often, rows will make the most sense, and that's what we're going to use in this case. The ticker symbol is what we have to identify the different stocks right now. So let's drag the ticker symbol down into rows. And we can see our pivot table changed to have these ticker symbols lining up. Now I need to bring in a value for each of those rows, for each of those ticker symbols. I asked in the question that we find the average adjusted close price for each stock. So the value I want to pull in is adjusted close, which is represented as a price. So let's go down our list and find adjusted close. I'm going to pull that into values, and it's going to put that value next to each ticker symbol. But Excel defaults to a sum, so it's saying the sum of the adjusted close price. which doesn't really make sense for us. I don't want to know the total of the company's adjusted close price over the course of the time that I pull the data. I want to know what their average adjusted close price is. I might want to know what their highest adjusted close price is, for example. I could find that as well. So Excel defaults to sum, but by clicking on this arrow on the right corner of the field we dropped into values, I can select that arrow and select value field settings, and I can change it from sum to average. I could change it to max or min. Those are other options, and there's several other options that I could consider as well that you might look at in a more advanced pivot table. So I'm going to change from sum to average. Just click on average and click OK. So now it's showing me the average of the adjusted close price. Let's format these values as currency. I will warn you though that Excel doesn't always keep formatting from a pivot table. So as you start to pivot around with this, you may lose some of your formatting. It depends on what version of Excel you have and what type of pivoting that you're actually doing. However, this looks nicer for now. And we're going to end this video here with just a really simple pivot table. In the next video, we'll look at how to do a VLOOKUP so that we can make this pivot table a little bit more advanced in our third video.